Now, we've been having a number of conversations as we talked about Queen Elizabeth II, who passed away last week at the age of 96, and kind of going through her complicated legacy, going through the history of the monarch, has forced us to ask some very uncomfortable questions, and most importantly, has forced the world to look at the British monarchy as whether it's still necessary, whether it's racist, whether it's truly something that should be revered and respected. And so we've been having these discussions because it's a part of the culture. And so we wanted to continue this discussion today. As I mentioned earlier today, the Queen's body is officially in England, will lie in state from Wednesday to Friday. Her funeral will be Monday. And this is a 10-day funeral, national mourning for the United Kingdom for their queen. But we wanted to bring in historian and scholar Brother Michael Imhotep to talk to us a little bit about the Queen's relationship to Africa and to Black people, and how Black history, or how history will see the Queen. We're also going to be joined by our culture crew members, Lise Winnie and Iman Heath. Brother Michael, thank you again, brother, for joining us. Always good to have you, dear brother. How are you this afternoon?
Oh, I'm all right, Farajii. How you doing, brother? Thanks for having me.
I'm staying black, brother Michael.
Yes. I understand that. I understand that.
Look, let's talk a little bit about this Queen Elizabeth II. People have been looking, now that her life is over, people are asking the question, we're seeing all types of debates about how history is going to view the Queen, especially in her relationship to Black people, Black Africans, to African nations, to Black people in this part of the world. What would you say? What is the right view, or the proper way for us to look at this complicated legacy of Queen Elizabeth II?
Well, I think it's one that cannot be separated from colonialism and the oppression of African people on the continent of Africa, in the Caribbean. You also have India as well. India was a colony of Great Britain also. So there have been a number of articles that have been written dealing with this. One of them is a good one from CNN. Cloud of colonialism hangs over Queen Elizabeth II, dealing with her relationship over Queen Elizabeth's legacy in Africa. And it deals with Kenya. We know that Kenya was a colony of Great Britain, and you're going to have the Mau Mau Rebellion of 1952-1956 that starts basically soon after she becomes queen in 1952, after her father, King George VI, dies. And you're going to have 150,000 Kenyans put into internment camps, concentration camps. Estimates are that it was a total of about 1.5 million who are going to be confined to their homes and have to have movement passes, things like this. But they inflicted torture on them, brutality, castration on African men in Kenya during the Mau Mau Rebellion, raping of African women. A lot of people. So I've read a number of different articles dealing with this. Okay. And when we look at it from the perspective of white people in England, the majority of them see her as the monarch of 70 years, someone who was constant, someone who was a rock, regardless of wars going on and things like this. The monarch was always a foundation, always a constant. Okay.
Right. Other
people who came from countries that were colonized by Great Britain, a lot of them don't see it that way. A lot of them see her as part of that whole machinery, that whole British Empire that colonized 100 years ago, colonized 1/5 of the world population. And then when she became queen in 1952, about a little more than 25% of the world population was under British rule. It was a little more than 700 million people.
I read that.
Yeah, but now that's at a time when the population of the world was about 2.5 billion. 700 million people were under British rule. So I have a couple of graphics here that I think would help. And I did this on my show, the African History Network show. I want to put this, I guess I put it in the chat for you to see this. Yeah. If your team could bring this up, okay. This is a map of the world, but I just posted it here. I just posted the link. If they could bring this up on the screen. This is a map of the world, but it shows the nations that declared their independence from Great Britain. And it's one thing to read it, and we're going to focus on the African nations. Okay, so Great Britain gets a lot of these African nations from the Berlin Conference of 1884, 1885, when these 14 European nations carve up, they meet in Berlin, Germany, they carve up Africa into colonies. And Great Britain is going to be one of the countries that gets the most. Great Britain and Portugal, things like this. Okay, but Great Britain gets a lot. Can we zoom in? Can you zoom in on that?
Yeah, we want to see if we can do. There we go. Keenan.
Yeah. Should be able to.
Brother Michael taking us to school right now. I'm feeling this.
So if we look at this map here, all right, this is a list of the countries that have gained independence from the United Kingdom. All right, and there are other maps out there, but those maps show the flags of the nations. This one actually shows the names of the nations. Okay, so over to the left, we know the United States, 1776. That's the Declaration of, and that's the during the American Revolutionary War, which is 1775 to 1783. So they fought for their freedom, but kept us enslaved. All right. Canada, 1931. You go to Jamaica, 1962. Now, what's interesting about Jamaica is that Jamaica was first colonized by the Spanish. It was conquered by Christopher Columbus in 1494 on one of Columbus's 4 voyages. But Great Britain, they go to war with Spain in 1655, and they hijack Jamaica from Spain. Okay, and we're going to see this happen. We're going to see if we just go back in history for a minute. These European nations that we see, France, Germany, Italy, England, these nations are going to start out as kingdoms formed by what are called barbarians or Germanic people. The Anglos, the Saxons, the Jutes, the Lombards, the Picts, the Franks, the Alans, the Vandals, the Visigoths. These Europeans have been fighting and killing each other for hundreds of years. Okay. Then they organize themselves into kingdoms, then organize themselves into nations. And then when these nations come out of the Dark Ages, going to the Renaissance age in about the 14th century, the teachings that the African Moors took into Europe in 711 AD are coming from ancient Africa, are going to bring Europe out of the Dark Ages. Then they start exploring and they start conquering other people's land, especially these Caribbean nations. And Christopher Columbus really helps the transatlantic slave trade to expand. He conquers the Bahamas, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Honduras, Panama, Jamaica. And then as these other European nations get involved in the transatlantic slave trade, because Spain was the second one involved in the transatlantic slave trade. Portugal was the first one in 1441. Okay, and if you look at a map, Spain and Portugal are right next to each other, and Spain and Portugal are right above Morocco. So the African Moors are going from Morocco into what was called the Iberian Peninsula, today known as Spain and Portugal. And, they fight against the Vandals and Visigoths and conquer them and conquer portions of Spain and go throughout Europe. But what you're going to see is you're going to see these Europeans fighting and killing each other over these new lands that they're conquering. And this is what causes the Berlin Conference to happen, because they said, look, Africa is large enough for us to carve it up into colonies. We don't have to keep fighting and killing each other over Africa, because they've been doing that for hundreds of years. Okay, so if we look at so you got Jamaica, you got the Bahamas, 1973, they declare independence. Now Antigua and Barbuda, they declared their independence 1981. They're talking about becoming a republic and removing the King Charles III now as the head of state. Okay, but if we go over to, and then you got Trinidad, Tobago, you got Barbados, Grenada, a lot of these places that people, especially Europeans, like to go on vacation. These were conquered by Europeans, especially Christopher Columbus, but also the British. Well, if we go look at Africa, okay, you look at these, is one thing to read it, is one thing to read the names, there's another thing to see it on the map. All these nations were conquered by Great Britain and they were colonies. You got Gambia. These are the years they declared their independence. And most of these nations, Great Britain got from the Berlin Conference of 1884 and 1885. Gambia, 1965, declared their independence. Sierra Leone, 1961. We know Ghana, 1957, Kwame Nkrumah, right? And Dr. King went to Ghana for the celebration. And he went every year on the anniversary of the celebration as well. Dr. King went to Ghana for this. Nigeria, 1960. Botswana, 1966. South Africa, 1931. Lesotho, which is an enclave of South Africa. Lesotho is a country within South Africa. They declared their independence 1966. Swaziland, 1968. Zimbabwe, 1980. Malawi, 1964. Tanzania, 1961. Kenya, 1963. Sudan, 1956, Egypt, 1922. Okay, so if you just go from left to right across this map, these are all nations that were colonies of Great Britain. Okay, Australia, okay, Pakistan. And because of the partition of India in 1947, this is what splits Pakistan from India. Pakistan.
Let me just put a pause because I know we got to take another pause. But
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you good. Because I think that and some people are checking in and looking at this map, and some folks are saying like understanding like, okay, how we get that far back, because some of these things happened before the queen was even born in some cases, right?
Exactly. Right.
But I think that it's important that you in 30 seconds, so give us a context in terms of, why is understanding like all of these relationships, all of these changes, and why is this important to understand where the queen stood on Black and African issues?
Right.
Why is knowing this level of history important?
Right. So first of all, I think it's important to note, based upon their constitution and the role of the monarch, they cannot speak out on political issues. They don't take political positions. However, the monarchy and that's I don't know when that went into effect, but that's what it is currently, and it's been like that for the past few decades. But they definitely benefit from this, and they definitely benefit from the treachery, from the colonialism, from a history of slavery, and England being involved in slavery from 1562 to 1834, when they officially abolished slavery. Now, they paid 46,000 British slave owners reparations, but didn't pay reparations to the 800,000 Africans that they freed. Okay, this is in British history, right? So when you talk to like MSNBC, they were in Kingston, Jamaica this past weekend on Sunday, and they interviewed the head of the Universal Negro Improvement Association. They interviewed a brother who's a Rastafarian. These people who are the descendants of those who were colonized by Great Britain, they don't make a big distinction between one colonizer and another colonizer. They see them all together. And I totally understand that, because Great Britain made billions, if not trillions of dollars off of enslaving and colonizing people, okay? And extracting the mineral wealth from those nations. So these nations so the cries of reparations are becoming even louder, and they should, from these nations. Barbados, who declared their independence, who became a republic, formed as a republic, already declared their independence, but formed as a republic November 2021, and named Rihanna as a national hero. So when you go read articles like this, like the one from the New York Times dealing with, there's a really good one from the New York Times that just came out on Friday. In Africa, the Queen's death renews a debate about the legacy of the British Empire.
I saw that.
Yeah, these people whose relatives were killed, like Professor Uju Anya from Carnegie Mellon University, who was born in Nigeria, and her family, she had family members killed during the Nigerian Civil War, and we know that the Great Britain was involved in this. They don't make a distinction. Some of them are happy that she's dead, and wish some others will go along with them. Okay. What is important, I think this is an important opportunity, number one, for the real history to be taught, because more and more articles are being written about the involvement of Great Britain and colonialism and the wealth that Great Britain built from enslaving and torturing people and taking people's lands. Number one. Number two, I think we have to push for reparations now, especially from Great Britain. And it's an international movement. I think we have to do this now more so than ever before. And some people may say, well, we want reparations from the United States. I agree with that. But the 13 colonies that became the United States started out as British colonies. That was under the control from Great Britain. They were involved in slavery here in this land before the U.S. even came into existence.
Hey, Brother Michael, listen, I want to put you on pause, because I know when we come back, we're going to continue this conversation. Okay. We're going to get some. I certainly want to bring in my online culture crew. We're going to bring Lisa and Iman. I'm loving everything you're putting out there. I think it makes so much sense for us to have a historical context, but then more importantly, to understand the relationships. And look, people are checking in, and I think. And Robert Redricks, you put this out there, Robert. This is the first time I'm hearing from you, so I welcome you to the show. Robert, you said something I think that a lot of people probably feeling, and they may not know how to say it. But you said, I never really studied or knew the background of the British colonies, and I'm 54 years old, shaking my head. Robert, that's why you come to the Black Star Network and the culture.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because you learn something. Exactly. And I mean, this ain't racism.
No,
this ain't racist. This is history. This is actual fact. This can be, and you know what I'm saying. And I think, and I appreciate you, Robert, because you putting your vulnerability out there. But we do need to help to make the connections, because in modern 2022, in our culture is so like mishmash. There's such a melting pot of facts and fiction. Mm-hmm. It's hard for people to differentiate between the two. And I think it's important. That's why it's important. That's why I loved having you on and other voices on, because to give us a distinction between what is actual history, what is opinion, what is facts, what are lies. Brother Michael, let's talk a little bit about this, because you brought up a great point, and I want to bring Lisa in. And I know Lisa and Iman were in the back. They were just, I know Iman eating it up. She rocking and rolling. She just, you know what I mean, off the love, off of the history. She loved it. But talk to us about this reparation piece, because you're right, Brother Michael. A lot of people are saying America needs to give up on the money, but we can't have a conversation about global reparations without looking at the British monarch. We just can't. And so I'm wondering, with King Charles being at the helm, do you think that this is going to happen? You think they're going to right some wrongs here? I mean, I think the monarch made some apologies years ago, and then on a couple of moments, I think then back in 2006, they apologized for torture and slavery of a couple of the islands in the Caribbean. But do you think there's going to be a turning of the tide here at this point?
Well, I want to stress this, that King Charles III does not handle political affairs. He does not handle the government. He is a symbol, and they have their government is Parliament.
Right.
That's like our house, their House of Representatives and U.S. Senate. Okay. And they just got a new prime minister as well. So their prime minister is like our president. So, but there is influence. So for instance, Queen Elizabeth II had meetings with members of Parliament every week. Okay. Private meetings, not public meetings, private meetings. And there is, what's going to happen is, you're having more talk now from Caribbean nations, for instance. Like there's an article from Reuters.com. Charles succession stirs Caribbean calls for reparations, removal of monarch as head of state. Okay, so they would the reparations would come from Parliament, so they had to put pressure on that form of government. But what's happening is because of more talk about Caribbean nations is causing the real history to come out. And so let me give you a quick example. Back in 2015, I talked about this on my show because the day she died, Thursday, September 8th, I did a 3-hour broadcast on the African History Network. So if people go to my website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, we have it right on the homepage. You can watch it. In 2015, then Prime Minister David Cameron of Britain was planning a trip to Jamaica. Okay. And this was one of their former colonies. The Jamaicans were demanding, 1, an official apology for reparations, 2, an official apology for slavery, 2, they wanted reparations. Right. They didn't want to talk. David Cameron basically said that was a long time ago. Let's be friends now and let's move forward. And one of the tricks that they try to play is that Great Britain did abolish slavery in 1834. But that was after like 272 years. They got involved in slavery in 1562 with Sir John Hawkins. The good ship. They were involved in slavery for about 272 years. Then they paid reparations to British slave owners, about 19.9 million pounds. I don't know what that translates to in dollars, but they just finished paying off. They had to take out a loan to pay that to 46,000 British slave owners. They just finished paying off the loan in 2015. The 800,000 Africans that were freed in 1834, they didn't give them any reparations. So for you to then say, well, we ended the brutal slave trade. Well, you're the ones that started it with Britain. It's like if I set a house on fire and then I call the fire department and the fire department comes and puts it out and the news cameras show up and I jump in front of the news cameras and say, I saw the whole thing. I'm the one that called the fire department and then try to take credit. No, you're the one that started it and then started the British involvement. Not the transatlantic slave trade started with Portuguese. So they're trying to play a shell game with us, with those Africans. And say, oh, well, we finally ended the British slave trade, and they say we did it before the U.S. Well, hell, that's after you made billions of dollars off of it, and then you still had colonies. So a lot of the Caribbean nations are continuing to move forward. Jamaica, I think they're going to file a lawsuit to file for reparations as well. But African people in this country, African Americans, we need to really pay attention to this. And we need to go after Great Britain as well, because the United States started out as what? British colonies, and you had slavery in all 13 of those colonies at one point in time as well. So we really need to pay attention to this. When it comes to getting reparations from the United States, I'm all for that. It's a different strategy, understanding the U.S. Constitution, understanding laws, because we need to learn how to make legal arguments for reparations. Unfortunately, I hate to break people's hearts, but a lot of these arguments for reparations we're making in the United States are not legal arguments, and they're not rooted in the Constitution. And if somehow they do pass, they're going to be overturned in court because we don't understand law and don't understand history.
At least when we listening to Brother Michael talking about this on this level, it sounds like we need to have a different conversation. I mean, Black folks in this country, we need to kind of be retaught on some things, right? Because somewhere along the line, and I'm not having this conversation just because I want to be like, oh, I told you so. I told you the queen is this or queen is that. But somewhere along the line, we didn't. Some history is being missing. It's missing. We're not connecting the dots here, and I'm wondering, will history, learning the true history of the monarchy and its involvement in everything from slavery to colonization and all of it, do you think that it will make any cultural shift for Black folks and putting an us understanding. Because I see a lot of Black folks, still say, hey, man, the Queen is a good person, not understanding the bigger picture. What's your take?
Well, I think that we always can have more knowledge. I don't think having more knowledge has ever hurt anyone. But I think that we do need to have a nuanced conversation. I don't think people saying that it's okay for you to have what your views on the Queen is necessarily a bad thing if that's what you want to believe. But I think we do need to have the conversations about what it actually means with having the British monarch and why it even still exists. I'm one of those people, honestly, that is like, well, they're just figureheads. You have the prime ministers is making like, what is the point? Basically, it's just socialism for white people because most of the money comes from taxes and of course the amount of wealth that they've amassed as a family. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense to someone who's in the US. And I think when you look at what's happened around the world, yes, we do need to have a conversation about slavery, the transatlantic slave trade, and how the British Crown actually had a big part in that. And then, of course, with the Windbush scandal in 2018, and Theresa May actually did come out and apologize for that. And they gave them some money, but I think only a very small percentage of people actually received that money because basically they brought those citizens from the Caribbean and some from India and Pakistan to help them after the war to build up the country with the promise that they would be able to become citizens there. And then they kind of like pulled the rug from underneath of them. And so we've seen this happen throughout history. My biggest issue is why now? Because the Queen has been ruling for 70 years and like we're just realizing all of these things now. So I'm like, that 2018 wasn't even that long ago. Like, why weren't we having these conversations then? Like, we're just starting to have these conversations now. And I think we do have to have them in a more respectful manner. I mean, we've seen with the Irish in Ireland, they were saying, ding dong, the Queen is dead and all. Like, we're seeing this all over the place. And I don't think that it's wrong that people have their own opinions. I think we do need to have nuanced conversations about the time to bring this up because this is someone's mother and grandmother and auntie and all of those things. So I think it's a way to have this conversation in a nuanced way that will get stuff done. But I don't know if we're quite having that conversation just yet.
Lise, not Lise, Iman, what's your take on that? I mean, these, and to Lise's point, that is true. Like we should have probably had these discussions a long time ago. But you know what? I'm a true believer that everything happens in its divine timing, right? Like the fact that we're now having these conversations, and I think part of it is just simply because we didn't know how. There's so many other things that were happening in the world at that time in 2018, 2019, 2020, hell, 2015. Our minds was all over the place. So what's your take on all of this?
So my question, like Lee said, is just why now? The best example that popped in my head was imagine your mother, you ask her for some fruit snacks, right? And she says you can't have and you can't get any. But then once she goes away to work, you go ahead sneak in that cabinet, you get your fruit snacks. So it's like now that our overseer is gone, let's go run for freedom. That's the best way I can explain it. But it's like, why now? I'm great that it was mentioned that, here in America, we aren't making legal arguments for reparations. I'm sure a lot of us think that just because we mention it or we gripe about how we've had to endure so much for so long, that should be enough, or that the behavior was unethical, that should be enough. I'm glad to hear that, hey, we got to do a little bit more research and go back to the books and actually make a legit argument. To go after Britain to get our reparations, my question is, how do we start? Where do we put the footwork in? Let's get the ball rolling now. Black social media, Black Twitter and TikTok, the things I've seen, and like Lee said, it should be a respectful thing. She is still a human. She was still somebody's parent, blah, blah, blah. But I think her passing is bringing Black people, Black culture, even our Caribbean brothers and sisters on a one team. We're starting to become on one accord. Like, hey, even though that water, I'm across the water here, we're still Black. It's still, at the end of the day, we're all rooted in the same thing. I think it started to show and expose us that we are the same people. We just got to different stops. We're the same exact people. So I think this is going to be a better outcome for the culture as far as us as Black people, not seeing each other as separate or as opposition. Just because you have a Jamaican accent and I have an American accent, I'm not as Black or you're not as Black. Like, we can take all that funny stuff out of it. The lines, I think, are becoming less blurred, especially when we learn the history of it. What we just learned just now, and so for some people that may have not known that, they can now share it with their relatives or share it with their friends that may not have agreed with their opinion. I think we're on the right track. I think this, like you said, Farajii, this is a divine moment, and I think this is going to push the culture forward as far as Black people.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. And Brother Michael, I mean, I want to bring you in to answer that question of, we're having these conversations now, but we could have had them 4 years ago. We could have had them 5 or even 10 years ago. What stopped us from being in that place? Or is it just because, to Iman's point, we're starting to come, like all of these things that are happening are creating the winds of change where Black folks are starting to see, like, you know what? We really are one people, regardless of the landmass that we may be on. We are all part of one struggle.
Right.
And you know what? I think that's a divine interruption. I think that could be part of why we're having these conversations. And I don't mind it. Like I say, if it's about timing for us to come together, we sometimes, in order for unity to happen, some other things have to happen. And
something I'm just for to happen for us to get the push to want to come together.
Yeah.
So what happens is when you have like huge events like this and a ton of articles written and it deals with history, it starts bringing out different aspects of that history. In 2021, when you had the 100th commemoration of the Tulsa Race Massacre, right? Then information started coming out about the Creek Indians owning African slaves and how Tulsa, Oklahoma was founded by Creek Indians around 1834, who got pushed off their land in Southeast United States because the Indian Removal Act of 1830. And you started hearing about the Black Freedmen Indian Treaties of 1866, where those Africans who were owned by the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole Indians got land, and they were in Oklahoma. So a lot of the early African-American landowners in Tulsa got land from those Indian treaties. Okay. So more information about the Tulsa Race Massacre started coming out because there was so much, there was national attention on it, tons of articles being written. So different aspects of that history started coming out. Well, when you have an international figure like Queen Elizabeth II, numerous articles were written. And for that first day that she passed away, there was not a lot of talk about British colonialism and the British involvement in slavery. But like in mainstream media, there was not a whole lot of talk. But you had people on social media, you had people of African descent on social media pushing that issue. And then that second day on Friday, you started having those articles being written to deal with another aspect of her life, and her life is historical and her life is tied to history. You started having articles in mainstream, New York Times, Washington Post, USA Today, CNN being written, and you started hearing from Africans in these different nations that were colonized by Great Britain. You started hearing from people whose family members were killed by the British, okay, during their fights for independence, like in Kenya or in Nigeria. So now is caused that dynamic to shift, okay, and you're going to see more of that as well because this is international. And more of this history. Now I'm seeing articles written about the colonization of India. Okay, there's an article from CNN dealing with this. So this is going to continue. All this real history is coming out, and what this does is, and see what the monarchy has done. They've done a good marketing campaign.
Right.
Because they market the glamour, the majesty, the gold carriage, the 30 horses pulling the gold carriage, the regalia, the uniforms, Buckingham Palace, Kensington Palace. They market this magic, but they don't deal with the history of the colonization, slavery, and torture that generated the billions of dollars to pay for all of what you see. Okay, so they've done a good marketing campaign with this also. And lastly, this also ties into a lot of the children's stories that we were told here in this country, Cinderella and Snow White and King Midas and things like this. And when you research a lot of these stories that we tell our children, a lot of these children's stories, they originate in England. Because this was an English colony. A lot of those stories originate in England, and they had a more violent nature to them. The violent nature was toned down to be told to children. Okay, so you got to research. You got to research a lot of these stories you tell out, Rapunzel and things like this, and Prince Charming, all this stuff. That stuff comes from England. And so then you wonder why. Okay, so why do some African Americans, why are they mesmerized by the Queen and stuff like that? Well, you told it to them when they were children. That's why.
Hey, look, brother Michael, man, oh man, woo.
My question, I guess, still is because we've always known that England had a part in a lot of the atrocities around the world. It's not that we didn't, because the Queen will not be ever held to account for any of those things because she's gone. So now this does fall down to Charles or King Charles III. I don't know if because I don't know if it was Kate and William who actually was it was in one of the Caribbean islands earlier. I think it was in Jamaica earlier this year, and they were pushing for reparations. My fear is the same things that's going to happen. We're going to talk about it, and then it's going to go away. It tends to be the pattern, especially here in the U.S. I'm not so sure about around the world, but here in the U.S., we think about it for a minute, and then it kind of goes away because it's not on the forefront.
Yep.
Right. Let me just ask a question. When you said they were pushing for reparations, who was the they you were referring to?
So the Jamaicans. There was an activist team.
I want to make a clarification.
Yes.
Because Kate and Harry or whoever it was, they were not pushing for
William. Yeah. No.
I want to make a clear distinction. Okay.
No, it was Jamaican activists.
The Jamaicans have been pushing for reparations continuously. When November 2021, when Barbados declared they were becoming a republic, then Prince Charles was there for the ceremony, and he read an official statement, and he talked about the abhorrent atrocities of slavery. Okay, now he did not give an apology for slavery. He did recognize the abhorrent atrocities of slavery, but that's as far as they'll go, and that's as far as Parliament will go also. So they got to be pushed farther. I don't mean Parliament Funkadelic, George Clinton, for those. Okay, I'm talking about one nation under a groove. I'm talking about Parliament in England. So they have to be pushed. Okay, but see, but this fight continues. But African people around the world have to unite. Okay, African people, those that were in those former colonies, and also the U.S., because this was a colony of Great Britain as well. We were colonized by them also, and some of us still have a colonized mindset. We have to unite to force reparations.
Do you think I'm sorry, do you think that's why you see a lot of the countries like Nigeria, they say they have a conflicted view of the Queen because she did do some of the decolonization that we've seen around the world, but yet she is attached to the crown, which did all of these horrible things? Is that why we're seeing them there's such a reserve on the heads of these countries to actually come out and say and be forceful with this language that they're using when talking about the British crown?
So it depends upon who you talk to in the country. If you talk to President Mubarak of Nigeria, he's going to be reserved, and he's going to talk about how great the Queen was and things like this. You talk to Africans in Nigeria whose family members were killed because of the British Empire, they're not going to be so kind. And yes, decolonization happened under Queen Elizabeth, but it wasn't because of Queen Elizabeth that decolonization happened. It's because those nations took up arms and fought against Great Britain, or they declared their independence. It wasn't because of Queen Elizabeth that Ghana got its freedom, or because Nigeria got its freedom, or things like this. So we have to be clear. So part of her legacy is there have been different articles written that deal with how her legacy is complicated, because decolonization did happen under her, but decolonization did not happen because of her. It just happened on her watch. Okay, these nations declared their independence. These African nations, and other nations declared their independence from Great Britain, but it wasn't because of her.
Let me just pause this thing right here, because we're gonna have to take another break. But Brother Michael, you have been highly insightful. I want to bring in just a couple of quotes from our culture crew, online culture crew, because folks have been chatting about all of this, as we've been hearing from you, and I've been hearing from our wonderful culture crew members. Janelle, you checked in and you said this is what hems us up. Other nations know more about our history than we do, and we have the nerve to perpetuate the myth of exceptionalism. For example, so-called FBA versus immigrants. Yep. You don't like my music. You checked in. Good to hear from you. You say growing up in North Ireland, we used the Queens to get up the noses of the nationalists. I always thought monarchy was silly, though. Wow. RJ McKenzie, thank you for checking in. You said Britain needs to give my Jamaican brothers and sisters their reparations now. They started it. They should fix it. How about that? Truth is power. You checked in and said the 13 colonies were put in place to push the movement of the charter that was given from the crown. Everybody paid reparations to the crown. That's how they got their power. Where is our cut? Where's our cut? We built. Yeah, absolutely. And McCall, you checked in and says apologies for the colonization of African nations, Caribbean nations is not sufficient. Hand over the money due to African nations. The U.S. needs to hand over money to African Americans as well. Real Brooklyn, you checked in and said the Queen is not to blame. The monarchy is basically there for constitutional duties. It has no formal role in the head of nation. In a nutshell, they are just there for theatrics. Brother Michael. Now, right, exactly. Now.
Yeah.
My hope is
not when the transatlantic slave trade started, but
No. Now it's a different thing, right?
Right.
But
they still benefit from the colonization. They still benefit from the accumulated wealth. The monarchy is worth about $28 billion. Queen Elizabeth had a net worth of $500 million. Okay, so
check.
And some of it comes from taxes too, right?
So it is true they're figureheads, but look at what they're holding up. You got to understand this history, the totality of it. Okay.
But they get taxes too, right? Like the British people, and they pay taxes, and they get some of that tax money too to live off of, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. But their role is true. Their role is not a political role, but once again, you have to look at the totality, not just Queen Elizabeth, like on the day of her death. You got to look at the totality of this history of Great Britain.
And I think that's the real challenge that's facing not just Black people in America, not just African nations, but the whole world. We are in a space now that when you're talking about high profile leaders like Queen Elizabeth II, and I said this yesterday, you have to look at the big picture. A person who's been in this role for 70 years, they are the institution. You know what I mean? They are the institution. And so we do have to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. And more importantly, we have to make sure that we have a factual, historical look. So that way our context and our understanding and our opinions and judgment is still rooted in something that can be deemed as credible. And I think that's the big thing. Brother Michael, you got the final word.
Yeah. This article that you have up right here, this is from CNN. Cloud of colonialism hangs over Queen Elizabeth's legacy in Africa. If you scroll down, if those in the control room, if you scroll down to the picture with Kwame Nkrumah. Now that's where the picture that they're showing now, she's in, I think it's Nigeria. She's in, but scroll down to the picture where she's with Kwame Nkrumah, and it talks about tragic period. Okay. And then scroll down right below that. It says in South Africa, one opposition party, the Economic Freedom Fighters, the EFF, was unequivocal in what they said about Queen Elizabeth. They said, "We do not mourn the death of Elizabeth because to us her death is a reminder of a very tragic period in this country and African history," end quote. "Our interaction with Britain has been one of pain, death, and dispossession, and of the dehumanization of the African people." Okay, and they have a link there where you can read their full statement on their Twitter page. But I know we're pressed for time, but I just want to talk quickly about my online classes.
Absolutely, brother. Okay, talk to us real quick.
All right, so everybody visit our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. I teach online history classes. We have one that just started up this past Saturday, 8-week online course, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. So we get deep into this history. That class is basically going to meet on Thursdays. As soon as you register for it, you can go watch the class we just did Saturday. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded, and y'all can scroll down the page. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it anytime. Today, keep scrolling. Yep. Okay, so right here we have the information for the class. Today, Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I have class number 1 from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968, starting up. And if you scroll down a little more, you'll see the class, the second class, from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. This class, we start in 1803 with the Louisiana Purchase and the Haitian Revolution, because those two events are related, and we go through history chronologically. We see what leads up to the Civil War taking place. We study Reconstruction, 1865, 1877, Jim Crow era, Civil Rights Movement, Black Power Movement, Great Migration, World War I, World War II, to see what happened to us after slavery ended, how we got to where we are today, to understand where we need to go from here. Okay, so you can register for the classes, and we have a bundle pack as well. TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com, TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com. So we'll see you in class. Thanks,
brother. And Michael Imhotep, who is the an educator. He's a scholar. He's a historian, and he's also the host of the African History Network podcast. Make sure y'all check him out at theAfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Brother Michael, always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much, brother.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate
everything you do, bro. Truly appreciate
thank you, brother. All right, thanks,
absolutely.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.